Hello. This is a voice-over narration of my process for creating this picture. As you can see, it is a teddy bear reading a book. Initially, I started off, as I do a lot of my paintings, is in a little thumbnail. So here I've zoomed out a long way and I'm just building up the basic shapes with reference to an image that I took off Pixabay. Here I am working on the darker colours. I'm forcing myself to work dark as I possibly can do and then gradually build up the light colours. I am using an oil brush, which I am using a lot more these days for starting off the foundation of my picture. I'm starting to work out how to use it now, and the key to this, I think, is the fact I've used it on 0 thinners. In theory it's going to be thick, but I've upped the stiffness to 100%. I've been playing around with various different modes in the oil brush, but never got it to blend the way I want it to. But with maximum stiffness, here you can see I'm laying down the colours, but I'm also managing to blend a little bit while I'm going along with it. This is kind of the brush I've been looking for, really, just to build up a foundation of my picture. I'm adding a few more details here regarding the fur and things like that, but I know I'm not going to overdo it, because later on, to add in detail, I typically use deep texture brushes, stencils, those kind of things, because I'm a little bit lazy basically. So I'm just laying in all the basic tones and the colours, making sure everything looks reasonable. As you can see, the video is starting to zoom out now. Bit by bit I'm enlarging my picture and adding in a bit more detail. Because I've started off small, I know that I've got everything roughly in place. And again, as I say roughly, I'm not strictly going along with the reference, it's just more of a guide. I'm following it moderately strictly at the moment, because I want to get some decent realism and all the lighting in the correct place. It's the way I use reference. As you can see, I'm starting to detail a little bit, still using the oil brush at the moment and still blending slightly, focusing on the eyes. The eyes I always find are the most important part of my picture. I tend to, if I'm just making it up, which I am at this point, I'm just pretty much making up and just putting my own spin upon the reference, I tend to put an evil slant literally on the eyes. As you can see, put a little bit of red there, a little bit of light coming through to make them look evil, because I always think that it adds to the character and makes a picture look a bit more interesting. I guess that's just my own preference, really. So I'm detailing, carrying on detailing, gradually building up the detailing. Almost forgot about the dark shadow along the bottom, of course, which is going to be pretty much the darkest part of this whole painting. I do at times get carried away with building up the lights in something like this, and I end up with something very flat, which I need to pull back a little bit to reduce the brightness and then add in the highlights again. I'm working on it. That's why I started off quite dark and started building up the lights. I'm building up the background a bit here to give the teddy bear a bit of sense of perspective of where he is, that he's actually sitting there rather than floating in midair. I don't think I'm quite at this point happy with the overall colour composition. There's a little bit of reflected light or ambient light from the blue background on his fur, as you can see, but I'm not overall happy with that. I typically like my paintings to be a little bit warmer. As you can see, I've just switched to the palette knife. My favourite palette knife, in actual fact, is this one, which just pushes paint around and gives me all the sharp lines that I want to. I've initially, with the oil brush, blended in a lot of things, and things look a bit rough at the moment, but at this stage I've decided to add in a few sharp lines, and this does it beautifully, and also makes it look natural because it's still blending slightly as it pushes the paint around. I have completely scarred up one of his eyes to make, again, it look a bit more interesting and a little bit more evil. Just adding in some detail at the moment, just jumping around I want to add in, desperately want to add in that highlight to the eye, which is almost the funnest part of the whole painting generally. And also at the moment I'm thinking about adding in some rim light, which I generally add in a little bit later on. As you can see, this rim light is at maximum whiteness. Not sure if I'm completely happy with it. This is great with digital art where you can play around with an idea. If you don't like it, you can undo it. Here is one of my absolute favourite sticker brush, which is the Bear Fur, which I use absolutely all the time on every single piece. Here I've blown up, as you can see, the size of the brush to be very big because I had an idea that I just wanted to overlay a little bit of texture. As you can see with this Bear Fur brush, it has a lot of subtlety to it and brings its own three-dimensionality, if that is in fact a word, to this. This is just trial and error. This is setting it on a different layer. I think I set it to overlay, so the whites will make things a little bit brighter and the darks here make things a bit darker. Not sure I was quite happy with the darkness that I was adding in. Maybe just leave it as a subtle texture. Playing through all the blend modes at the moment, just getting something that looks right, that fits into the overall composition, that binds everything together. Still not entirely happy with that background at the moment. It's still a bit cool for my liking. I think I'll need to sort that out. Adding in a bit more detail. As you can see, the thinners have gone up on the oil brush here. This is something I typically do later on in my painting so that it just overlays almost in a quite transparent way some paint so it doesn't disrupt too much what's underneath. Playing around again, digital art, playing around with an idea of adding in like a cloth or a blanket that he's sitting on, but I don't really like that. I think I just want him sitting in a nice, clean, shiny floor. I say shiny because you see what I do in a minute. I use my usual trick to get a reflection, which is to take the base layer that the teddy bear's on, duplicate it, flip it upside down, reduce the opacity, and as you can see now I'm using my favourite palette knife just to drag the colour through to give a ripple effect, which makes it look as if he's sitting in a little bit of water, which I thought might look quite cool and a bit weird. As you can see there, I just moved the rotation a bit. I wasn't quite happy with the orientation of him. It looked to be slanted a little bit. Just adding in a little bit of water, just a little bit of water disturbance, and just for artistic license, just something coming off his ear. No idea really why I did that. Maybe he's a bit damp after sitting there for a while and all the water soaked into him, possibly. Detailing a little bit more. Still playing around that rim light. I still seem to want to desperately add in rim light, which I always do on a picture, but sometimes it doesn't always work. Adding in more detail. I wasn't happy with that nose. It looked a bit too flat. I think it's probably okay. I'll leave it the way it is and focus on something else, I think. Playing around a lot with the background, using some gradient fills in ArtRage, which are really useful. As you can see, I really like on the gradient fill the circle fill because it gives you a nice light coming from one side, and just I don't really do much with the background, just a little bit of texture, potentially a bit of light. Not happy with the colours here, so I am colour adjusting at the moment to get it all to fit in. Changing it to green or blue, not sure, don't think that really quite works at the moment. I almost know that I'm coming towards the end of this picture because I'm starting to play around with colours a little bit. The way I use colours is typically to create a new layer, probably put it in overlay mode, start applying gradients, just playing around with things a little bit. It's okay at the moment, still not happy with that blue background, so now I've added in a nice colour. I think just binds things together, warms things up, makes things look a bit more interesting. Darkens things slightly, which I always like to do around this point because I might want to draw some of the highlights out around this stage. Here I've created a new multiply layer with some thick paint. As you can see, the stiffness has gone right down, which means you're going to get massive impasto. And this is just a trick I found out to add in more that painterly effect. As you can see, the impasto brushes are coming out, and it looks as though I've painted all of that using a thick oil brush. But of course, as you know now, secret's out, I have not done that. It's just a little trick that I discovered because this is ArtRage, and I like things looking natural and painterly, organic, natural media. I don't really like my paintings to have a digital, clean look. As you can see here with my favourite palette knife, I'm pulling out some of the fur on the edges. Again, moving paint around this layer. And that's it. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this voiceover tutorial or narration on my general process. I'm certainly going to look to do more of these in the future. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much. Goodbye.